I haven't been this excited since that time Tim Cook showed me his iPad.
I know, right? I'm about to pass out.
This is a big day for us on Photocombobulate.
Because we got Joe McNally here.
It's time to get real with one of the best shooters in the business.
Joe McNally's a legend, but he's not above hanging out with some hacks like us.
He's here to talk about his new book, The Real Deal, which is packed with awesomeness.
What are we waiting for? I'm Mason Marsh.
And I'm Jeff Carlson. This is Photocombobulate.
And I'm Joe McNally.
I want to jump right in. I've got a bunch of questions. I know Jeff has some, so I'm going to jump in with my first question. In our last episode of this podcast, Jeff and I shared our favorite images from last year, and we both came to the conclusion that we're craving some portraiture in 2022. We've been isolated from other people, and we feel like this deep drive to get out and make some portraits. How's the pandemic left you? What kinds of images do you need to make these days?
I'd say I'd be right there with you. I'm a big part of my archive and assigning work has been in the realm of portrait photography. Sometimes it's an illustrative portrait, maybe an athletic portrait, various kinds of subcategories. But yeah, encountering a human being in front of the lens is what I always have, gravitated towards. It's a source of strength, gets me excited to, take a look at another person, look at their life. I'm always curious. And the exchange is almost always a wonderful one. It's amazing that someone trusts you and gets in front of your camera, which is a very vulnerable place to be, and, works with you to create something that will hopefully stand the test of time.
Yeah, it's I just feels like we've had such a drought of human connection, and I think people need good portraiture now more than ever, and I'm sure glad that we've got you. Looking forward to more of that.
Absolutely.
I loved your book. I've read several of your books. This one so far is my favorite, probably because of the fact that it's the story of you. And a major theme in your new book is work ethic, I think. And I've always appreciated your approach to projects and assignments as this kind of merging of creativity and the willingness to work to make it happen. In a world where Instagram reels reach more eyes than 12-page National Geographic stories, is there still a place for hard work?
Sure. Photography is hard work. There's no two ways about it. It's, there is kind of this, it's almost a mirage that's been created through the digital prowess of the tools that we have. The cameras come in these glistening boxes, and they're automatic, and they have millions and millions of pixels, and promises are made, and autofocus, auto this, auto that, all of which is wonderful. I'm so happy with the technology that we have. But what it can tend to obfuscate a little bit is the mission of the photographer, which is telling good stories, is still a difficult one. The technology facilitates us, to be sure, but it doesn't, quote unquote, make photography easy. Never has been, never will be.
Right. So one of the things that I really appreciate about the book is your candor. There's a chapter where, there's a chapter called The State of Things, where you're talking about shooting a basketball team, and it was eye-opening because you break down the entire job, which was great. But you also mentioned like your editor honing in on one pose and saying, do you also have that where they're not, making a wild face? And you're like, no, I didn't. So there seems to be this pressure of you have to go out and you have to get it right, but that doesn't really happen. And so, if you could just sort of talk about like the real life experiences of having, as you mentioned a lot in the book, the confidence to go out and screw something up or change in the middle of something in the field if something doesn't go the way you want. I'd love to hear just more about that.
Sure. I mean, you do go out with a set of expectations, especially when you're on assignment and money is changing hands. A magazine may direct you. The art director may want what the art director wants, and that's totally fine, because they are paying the tab and they, have a right to expect certain things or a certain level, a certain standard. In the case that you're mentioning here, the ESPN job, the editor really didn't have much input on the actual visuals. They just needed a really cool photograph of these stellar basketball players at UConn. And within the context of that, I was free to do whatever I wanted. Of course, when you start to ship in your images, they might zero in on something that you didn't completely turn the corner on, or maybe your instincts shorted out on you and you said, this is not really working all that well. Let me move on. And you move on in a summary fashion, maybe too soon. And sure enough, you show that image, the client says, oh, wow, do you have more of this? And it's like, oh, no, I don't. That's why I've always been a big fan of editing really tight. When I was shooting for magazines like Life, they would see, 10 slides. That's it. And that was a really a well-established bond of trust, because magazines at that point in time would assign a photographer because they thought the photographer's vision or capabilities were right for that job. And they would accept what you sent in. It wasn't like you shot 1,000 frames, I want to see 1,000 frames. No, it started to come around like that, to be sure. But Geographic, my first cover story for National Geographic, I shot 1,500 rolls of Kodachrome, 1,500 times 36. Wow. And the editor saw 80 chromes for a final take, and about 35 ended up in the magazine. So yeah, there is a winnowing process, to be sure. You drive down towards your best images and you're not completely certain where they're going to come from.
Yeah, sort of on that note, Joe, nowadays it's, as sports photographers especially, are shooting directly to editors. They're not getting that chance to call and select their favorite shots from the game or from the whole event. How do you feel about that? I mean, it seems like photographers now are just feeding thousands of images to editors, and the editors get to make that creative choice.
True. That is, and it's a two-edged sword. A lot of photographers, myself included, occasionally anyway, are not great editors of their own work, because we get emotionally wrapped up in what we're doing. And, it's like, we like everything, perhaps. Mm-hmm. So editors, good editor is worth their weight in gold, because they can really hone in on what's important in a take. But I did come through newspapers and wire services where economy was really important. I learned that lesson at a championship ball game in New York, shooting for UPI, where I was so nervous that I was covering third base, and I bagged and chipped all my film that I was shooting. And it really jammed up this tiny little closet darkroom. Mm-hmm. And Larry DeSantis came to me afterwards, and he almost sort of pushed me against the cinder block wall, and he pointed a finger at me and he said, tonight, he said, you set the world's record for shipping me insignificant film. Pop-ups, ground balls, what is this bullshit, and I realized, that was a powerful thing to realize. I had jammed the operation up by not being economical and only sending my best stuff. Okay. Now, as you say, at a sporting event, the pictures are piped right into the editor, and they're seeing it, and it's out on the wire. It's around the globe before the race is over almost, It's crazy how fast it is.
Yeah. I worked as an AP stringer for a few years. I was a newspaper photographer too. And I actually ended up in the equivalent of Kankakee. I'm the guy that went off to the little small market dailies and languished there for several years. But one of the things that I really treasured about being a photojournalist was the chance to meet with a wide spectrum, and photograph a wide spectrum of people. Yeah. I really sort of felt like it was the best job in the world, because while everyone else was at work, I got to go out and see what everybody else was doing. And you've met and photographed world leaders, elite athletes, famous people, coal miners, and a whole bunch of average Joes. I want to know, I want to kind of tap into your wisdom, if you will. After meeting all these people for 40 plus years on the job, what's the secret to happiness?
Oh, Lord. Well, I know my secret to happiness, and her name is Annie Cahill, my wife. And,
Good answer.
But I think you can tell. I mean, I'm with you on that, Mason, in terms of going out into the world. The beautiful thing, truly beautiful thing about being a photographer is we are oftentimes set to go photograph someone or something that is excellent or fascinating or amazing. Occasionally, you're sent to photograph something that's truly awful, and those are those assignments will come your way. But oftentimes you're a witness to excellence. Someone is just so good at what they do. And most of the time I've found that the grace of being in presence of that is an astonishing and refreshing, it's almost like taking a wonderful, dive into a beautiful pool or something like that. Oh my God, you see what folks are capable of, and you're witnessing that, and your camera stands in service. Like I photograph dance. I've always photographed dance. I love ballet. And when a dancer gives you a gift in front of the camera, perfection is achieved. They're in the air. You have to rise and meet that perfection at the lens. That's your obligation. You have to marry that excellence that's in front of the lens. So that is a wonderful source of happiness. I mean, it's a tremendous contentment to come away from the field having met someone and photographed them in a unique way. And you got what you come for. You got a picture that other people are really going to begin to understand who and what those folks are. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Do you find that those interactions changed how you shot subsequent people? Like how much is there a bleed over from those experiences and then building forward?
Sure. I mean, everything does lead to other things. I always tell young photographers, you have to take the assignment that truly terrifies you, because no matter what happens, that's a gateway assignment. You open that door, you go through it. On the other side of it, win, lose, or draw, you'll be a different and presumably better photographer. So my editor at Geographic came to me and he said, look, we were jamming on other stories. And he said, this photographer came back and dropped this story. Doesn't want to do it. It's called The Universe. This is National Geographic. We're doing a story on the universe. You've got 12 weeks. Do you think that's enough? Typical.
Can you shoot that actual size, please?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And it was on a story about observing the universe via the huge telescopes in the world.
Oh, yeah.
I had never shot a telescope before in my life. I had no idea what I was walking into, and I grabbed the job immediately. I was like, give me the work. The other guy doesn't want it. I'll take it. Give me the work. And so it absolutely nerve-wracked about what you're going to try to do, but you figure it out. You figure it out. If photography it's best to go into the field with a plan. I'm not saying not to, but photography is about oftentimes turning on a dime, ad hoc solutions, the surprise that occurs in the field, whether it's a good surprise or a bad surprise, you react at camera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was one of the things I loved about photojournalism was it was like catching a tiger by the tail. You're really just going to do your best with what you're given. And, I appreciate that story about you grabbing that assignment, and it led you to Hawaii, right? Where you photographed the telescopes in Hawaii and all of that. Yeah, I can't imagine being a National Geographic contributor and having any kind of idea that I would drop that assignment. So I want to kind of chase that a little bit. What assignments have you dropped? What have you turned away from and said, nope, I can't do it?
There's been a few I should have. I ended up doing poorly on. Yeah, I haven't really turned away jobs so much because like I just didn't want to do them or something. There were jobs I wasn't comfortable with ultimately, and Life magazine had me assigned, and I spent a lot of time with Jack Kevorkian, Dr. Death, and over time I grew uncomfortable with that. It ended up not working out. It was not published, and I'm thankful for that. I've since occasionally published a couple of portraits of him just to discuss the whole idea, which incidentally I'm a huge supporter of the right of someone to, end their life in the way that they see fit at a certain point in time, but yeah, there's been things, sometimes people rise up and they just push back. And I've walked away from jobs. I had a high powered television executive refused to pose in the very restaurant that she designated as the locale. She said, well, no, I'm not going to pose here. And there were nudes on the wall, these little nymphs, these woodland fairies. And she said, oh, no, you can't. I won't pose in front of that. I said, well, this is your choice of restaurant. This is your favorite restaurant. She goes, I'll photograph in the bar. The bar was just a brown wall. I said, I'm not going to photograph in the bar. And so that leaves us at an interesting position. And I walked away from the job. I just left. I didn't shoot. So, yeah, I mean, what beyond the pixels, beyond the f-stops and all of that, this is most of the time an exercise in human relationships. And I think it's incumbent on photographers, no matter if they're thrown into something that's disadvantageous or whatever it might be, to find a way. Your editor expects you to find a way. Once you say yes to the job, it's your baby. You have to work it out.
Yeah. Jeff, you got a question?
Yeah. Sorry.
I feel like I've been dominating here.
No, well, I'm letting you dominate because my internet connection is unstable according to Zoom.
That's the only thing unstable.
Yeah. So one thing following on that is, your work has been very diverse, really varied. Are there things that you have shot that you had no idea that you would be doing? Like, for example, did you ever think that you would shoot the Olympics, or has it been just so open, like I'm just going to shoot all sorts of things because I'm curious and that's where the jobs are?
Yeah, there are a lot of photographers out there I respect tremendously who their entire career they've hewed to a certain theme or course or cause or people or geographic area, preservation of wildlife, ecology, et cetera. I've never done that. I've been a kitchen sink photographer. I refer to myself as oftentimes a general assignment magazine photographer. Whereas if you need, politics, science, technology, celebrity, sports, feature, Hollywood, whatever it might be, I am curious about it. I know a good assignment when I get one. Sometimes you think, oh, okay, yeah, I'll go do this. And there's not really a piece of your soul that is associated with that job. You're doing it to make a living. And I talk about that in the book as well. There's absolute honor in that. You maybe don't think about the job ever again, but on that day you went out, you did your job ably and well, you got paid for it. Nothing wrong with that. That's a good day in the field. But then every once in a while you get those assignments that reverberate, and that, can I be mildly scatological on this program?
Absolutely.
Sure.
You can be wildly scatological if you want.
I had an old photographer at the New York Daily News pull me aside once, and he looked at me and he goes, "Kid, when you're getting good stuff because you can feel your asshole going like this." At that point, I had no idea that my optical nerve was connected to my rectum. But, there you go. For some folks, that's where the tremors occur. That's okay. But in your gut, when you've got a good job and you go after it, and those jobs that occur where you're tuned up about, or you feel like you're synchronous with, those are really special moments.
Yeah. It seems to me that, reading your stories in the book and following you for years, you make those moments a lot of times. You almost make it sound like they're just serendipity, but the truth is, I think a great example, and one of my favorite parts of this book is your desire to shoot in low light to highlight this new Nikon lens, this 0.95 f-stop lens. And you wanted to shoot in a coal mine. Your idea was coal mine, and you couldn't gain access to one domestically. And so you ended up going to Romania and making what I think are the strongest photographs in the book, are these intimate portraits of these coal miners in Transylvania, right? I'm struck by the eyes of those coal miners, and I'm really drawn to those photos. I can spend hours just sitting and looking at those guys, thinking about their lives are like, thinking about what it's like to be down in the ground, in the dark. And I feel like that was a great example of you taking an idea, but then pushing and pushing and pushing until it was magical, like you said, until you felt that. I'm sure you felt that tingle, because those photographs really connect.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I've always celebrated labor, work. I think, again, the idea of the camera standing in service to someone, there's real honor and dignity in work, whether you're, a farmer or a stockbroker or a plumber or a firefighter, whatever. I'm curious about what people do. How do they make their way through their day? And certainly coal mining, it's a very, topic that's in the news. I had no connection to that. I was interested in these men. They were all men who went down into the mine, and what they do to make a living, what the human spirit will go through to, bring home sustenance for their family. Or, these men risk a lot every day in the most raw conditions you could imagine. I mean, this mine, it was not safe. To me, it was not safe. And they go in there every single day. And so, as I say, and I write about, we're, a couple of kilometers under the earth. I mean, there's no coming back from this if anything goes wrong down there. And we were laughing. I'm sure the jokes were at my expense in Romanian, but that's okay. That's all right. I'm the interloper. I'm a tourist. I'm only down there for a day. These men go down there every single day. So I think it's part and parcel of my job to honor them, to honor what they do and the sacrifice they make.
So I want to follow on that. And I know the story of the Kentucky coal miners that you went and photographed, that you were able to share the portraits that you made with them. I know that if you go and you photograph a model and you show them the image on the back of the camera, you get them a print later, they're like, oh, thanks. But when you photograph a coal miner or, an average Joe, so to speak, and you share your work with them, what happens there for you when you get them that work and they get a chance to see what you did for them with your camera? As you said, that camera's, paying respect to them.
Yeah, that's a wonderful moment because, when you share that work or show them the LCD or send them a print, a lot of times folks who are, as you refer, average Joes, average folks, don't really view themselves as beautiful. That's, Beyonce, gets told she's beautiful 100 times a day. Most people don't. So those miners I photographed in Kentucky, when I sent all of those prints back, and there was a lot of prints, I had them made and they were very nicely done. Those miners were stunned. And the gentleman who was my contact there called me back up and said, "You've got a welcome there anytime." Mm-hmm. That's powerful. That, again, is human relations. And those folks had dignity, pride, beauty, honor, grace in front of the camera. And they had never imagined that, I think, could happen.
Yeah. Well, I also there's a section in the book where you are revisiting some people that you've shot early on. And again, that human connection, because I think so many people think of photography as, all right, I'm going to go and I'm going to shoot this one thing and I will probably never see them again. And yet you have people that you've shot multiple times over the years. You have a really loyal and wonderful crew that you've worked with. And I have to say, I love the fact that you always make a point of showcasing the people that you are working with. In the things that you write about, or that interviews that I've heard, like, you're always talking about Lynn, and you're talking about the assistants, and just building everybody up.
It's a team effort for sure. It's a team effort. Lynn does so much pre-production work. It's like she hands me the baby. It's like, okay, I got it. Here's the baby. You take care of it now. It's a different kind of pressure. She'll work for 5-6 weeks on something to get it just right. Then she turns it over to me, and sometimes it's a 1-day shoot or 2-day shoot or something like that. So it's a very different form of pressure. And it is very much a team. I listen on location. I listen to assistants. I listen to the talent. And sometimes there's ideas there that are well worth incorporating. Or you can draw the tenor of the job, from the overall atmosphere of the crew, and make sure that you stay on top of that and you lead it. You remain positive. When I did the Z9 marketing campaign recently, our first day in the field did not go very well at all. In fact, it just went horribly. It didn't get a photograph. Weather was against us. A whole bunch of stuff happened. And I just was like, okay, we've got tomorrow. You pick up and you go. And if you, as the leader of the band, so to speak, get down or get morose or get angry or resentful or start shouting or yelling, that's a bad thing. And it takes everybody down. It really does. Because people don't, need to put up with that. There was a legendary story years ago of a Sports Illustrated shooter who was kind of a screamer, very large man. And he was shooting Sports Illustrated swimsuit, very well-known photograph, actually. They seeded the water under a surfboard, and the model is luxuriating on the surfboard, and underneath the board are all the tropical fish, and it's an over and under. But he was quite large and he couldn't be stabilized. So they lashed him to a dock pilot, literally.
Wow.
And then when the shoot was over, he handed the camera up, and his assistants just said, "See ya.
See you later."
And walked down the block, and they stood at the end of the pier and had themselves, I don't know, margaritas or something, and watched the tide come in. He didn't yell so much after that.
That's a classic old story.
As legend has it, I was not there.
So, Joe, both Jeff and I have attended workshops of yours, and I teach photography now. That's mostly what I do, other than this podcast. And I really enjoy working with folks who are learning photography and kind of catching the bug, if you will. One of the things I really take away from your workshops, and I'm not a photographer that goes out and does a lot of portraiture. I tend towards, while I might be a generalist, I tend towards landscapes and things like that because they're easy. Landscapes don't ask to look at the screen, and they don't bug me about how long I'm taking to set up everything and all of that. So when you're talking to someone who's new to photography and they're inclined to take the easy route, how do you encourage people to maybe lean in and try portraiture, try things that stretch their comfort zone? What would you say to someone who's like, I'll just stick with my macro water droplet photography for now because people scare me?
I've had many, many people in workshops like that. Who are, resolute landscape photographers, as you say, or maybe they live in a different world, and they do close-up work, or they have a serious difficulty, and it's very understandable, engaging street photography or portraits, and that's oftentimes why they come to a workshop, because I don't have landscapes. I don't advertise them, I don't run landscape workshops. It's a portrait workshop. We oftentimes call the workshops that we do a face and a place, because that's what I did oftentimes for National Geographic. A face in a place helps tell you the story. The shoemaker in his shop, whoever it might be, so that helps round out the context in which you are photographing someone. It gives the viewer information to chew on. I always hark back to get a picture published in the National Geographic had to fire on 3 separate pistons. It had to be pictorially successful, it had to be informationally successful, and it also had to emotionally involve the reader. Those 3 levels, you can have eye candy all you want. You bring a pretty sunset or something into the Geographic, and most of the editors will be like, what are you thinking? We've seen this, type of thing. So storytelling pictures are powerful things to do, and they are frightening a little bit because you get emotionally involved with someone, and that is sometimes a hard thing to do. But people have to be patient with it. They have to. Just a couple of successes can be the wind in your sails for a long time. You guys know, right? You're out there with cameras. You can go for months, feeling like for months you haven't made a good photograph. And then all of a sudden something happens and you turn a corner and there's beautiful light and there's kids, playing with a ball or something like that. And you make some wonderful pictures that just lift you up again. And that's the wind in your sails for a long time. So yeah, to that end, I tell people you got to hang in there. You've got to step forward. Oftentimes I'll go with them. I'll see if I can break through the initial defenses if I can, and then sometimes what happens is, forgive me if I'm going on here, I don't mean to, but someone will come in with a photograph where the subject is working with them. And the photograph still doesn't work because they shot 3 frames and moved on because they're so nervous. Well, I felt that was taking the person's time. And I said, you already did the hard part well. The hard part is gaining access. The hard part is getting inside someone's fence. The easy part is the pixels and the lens and all that. That's the mechanical aspects of it. And then once you're inside the door, don't rush back out again. Stay with it. Don't shoot 3 frames. Shoot 30, 40, 50, 100. Keep a rapport going. Don't overstay. Don't be, a jerk about it. But the hard part is making the connection.
Well, that said, I think that one of the things I tell my clients in classes is photograph people you love, people that you know. And there's a great quote, and I don't know who said it. It might have been you. It said that all the pretty photos in the world don't amount to a hill of beans. People love photos of people they love.
I don't know who said that, but that's pretty accurate. Yeah.
It seems to me that whenever I photograph one of my family members, maybe one of my kids or my wife, I'm really self-conscious. I'm very much, if it's an iPhone snap, that's easy. But if it's getting out the real camera, setting up a light, maybe setting them in front of a backdrop, then it feels like you're imposing. And I think you mentioned this a little bit, pushing through this. But I do feel like a gift that we can give as photographers to people that we love is to capture them honestly. And I don't feel inclined to do that enough. I've got a real hang up about that. And I think a lot of photographers do because it's scary.
Yeah, it is. But, again, it's, that old song, don't you know don't you know what you've got until it's gone, those moments that we lose that we're like too lazy, too reticent, too nervous, too this, too that. I'll shoot it again. I'll shoot it tomorrow. No, you're not going to shoot it tomorrow. The light will not be there. The moment will not be there. Photography is a very immediate thing to do, and you have to rise up and grab it as it happens. I mean, that's a cliche, but we are in the business of trying to stop time. And if we sit back, time just slides right past us. I mean, we just lost Annie's mom in the fall, and after a long illness. And I really, really loved Mom. She was a great mom to me. And she was never a huge fan of me when I pulled out the camera and I would photograph Annie and Mom in the kitchen getting Christmas dinner ready or something like that. She was not, oh, yeah. But boy, are Annie and I glad we have those photographs.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it can be like, I know you maybe don't want to do this, but I got to do it. You've got to do it. You have, if you're a photographer, you have to photograph. The famous Balanchine quote I oftentimes refer to when he was describing ballet dancers. He said, "I don't want people who want to dance. I want people who need to dance." And that you need to photograph. It's like breathing. You just need to confront the world with a camera. It's important. I mean, if you are a photographer, I mean, obviously, if you do other things, instinctually too, those folks, whoever they are, they need to do what they do, because what they do makes up a big chunk of who they are.
Yeah. Sort of following on that a little bit, I'm curious, like, do you undertake personal photo projects, or because you run a studio, you run a business, your personal ideas end up being something where you have to figure out, okay, how can we make this happen?
Yeah. I've never really had a dividing line in my head between personal work and professional work. Luckily, it's just been like sloshed back and forth. The best jobs I've been assigned to, if I develop a real good relationship with that job, it becomes personal. And sure, I have personal pictures, of my family and whatnot. But in terms of, being there, and there are photographers out there who really make very distinct separation between the work they do for money on assignment and the work they do for themselves. Or they use those money-driven assignments to fund a personal project. There is that, and I truly, deeply admire that. It's pretty amazing. For me, it's been, again, a bit of a grab bag. I've done jobs that have become just part of me, and that to me is obviously very personal.
Yeah, it's obvious from your work, both your writing and your photography, that you're a gifted storyteller. And a lot of what you talk about in the new book is these great stories of assignments you've done, projects you've done. What story are you itching to tell that you haven't told yet?
There's a number of them. I grew up on fantasy, books and comic books and epics and Jack London and, all that kind of stuff. And so I do have, maybe you could call it an adventurous imagination, and maybe I've always wanted to run away with the circus or something. And I've always loved people on stage. I've loved performers, be they singers or dancers or musicians or actors, actresses. I've always loved the notion of folks who are so powerful and so magnetic that they're willing to step on stage and demand that people pay money to come see them. And like, wow, So I've always wanted to do a book about the circus and start with the old style circuses of, China, India, Eastern Europe, and just kind of keep working my way through over to the more modern expression of the circus in, Cirque du Soleil and high-powered kind of stage shows and this and that. I've always wanted to do something that could be a progression like that. Who knows? I used to suggest it every year as a story idea for National Geographic, and they would routinely turn it down.
Keep pitching.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So, but there's still things that I want to do. And sometimes it just evolves, into a single image. Like, wow, that would be really, really cool to do. Like something, And then I do try to build a consortium around that, of perhaps financing or, write proposals to see if I get somebody interested,
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems the work these days, and I watching you from afar, it seems like you get a combination of editorial assignments. You do things like going off to the Olympics, which I'm not sure economically how that fits your business, if you're there on assignment for one particular client or if you're sort of broadcasting to several different clients. But projects like Nikon, you had this long running relationship with Nikon, and they come out with a new camera. And it's just assumed, I'm guessing, that Joe's going to go take this camera out and make some amazing photos with it, and we're going to put these in ads. So economically, as you progress into the future and stock photographies, you illustrate this really well in the book. Stock photography is really not there. Editorial assignments, I'm guessing, are harder and harder to come by. So are these projects where you're working specifically with a company like Nikon, is this becoming more and more your bread and butter?
Sure, absolutely. The smaller scale editorial assignments have by and large gone away. Especially given my age, and the longevity I have in the business, I'm not really in the assigning mix anymore. Magazines, I've shot for tons of magazines that are gone, so it is a different world. As I say, I write proposals. I try to get people intrigued. Commercial entities, even though I try to shoot in an editorial fashion for those commercial entities. At the Olympics, I was shooting with Zuma Press. It's a wonderful kind of boutique agency that services, clients all over the world. The Nikon relationship has always been super positive. It's never a given. I'll quote unquote get a job surrounding a launch or a new camera. Lots of talented photographers they have access to, so, I'm blessed to have shot a number of things for them that have been well received. So the Z9, I was very proud of the work that we did, and also really fortunate just to get my hands on this amazing machine, which was pretty remarkable. And I used to use the terms, editorial photographers, we used to fish for fish, and now we fish for whales. You only get, you get a few big jobs a year instead of lots of smaller jobs. And then also we supplement, I always counsel photographers to try to establish some means of passive income, books, royalties, fine art prints, write a blog. We have a pretty far-reaching blog. It's still has very good numbers in terms of readership. So we have supporters of that, so that kind of overall mosaic, of something from here and there, et cetera, interspersed with a job, interspersed with a workshop, interspersed with a lecture date or something like that, keeps the ball bouncing.
Yeah, you're not bored, right? You're not
no, no, I'm not. I'm definitely not bored. I tried the pandemic, was horrible, and still is for everyone, but it did create that little bit of a window where I could stay at home and actually write this book. If I was still out there tilting away at the pace that I was accustomed to, I probably wouldn't have gotten the book done.
Yeah.
When the pandemic hit, I came home. I was March 15th, 2020.
Wow.
75 days into 2020. And at that point, I had traveled 68 of them. And I was scheduled to go back to Japan and then go back for a third time for the games. And all that went away. And I was just home. And I wasn't on an airplane again until I went to Tokyo the following year. So that was a big change. And so I'm thankful that I did have the time, and also I was smart enough to use it. Like, okay, time to do this. Because I had signed a contract to do this book with Rocky Nook, the ever patient folks at Rocky Nook. They're wonderful. I had signed the contract to write a book for them 5 years ago. I just kept not getting to it.
Yeah. it was really gratifying to read in the book that you started as a writer, because actually that's kind of where Mason and I are. I mean, I've been a writer for a long time who then got into photography. And so I think just by nature, because you started as a writer, I think of you as a writer who also does a whole lot of photography. But I love the fact that in the book, you're talking about not just the act of doing it, but the necessity of, if you're going to be a photographer, you need to know how to write. You need to know how to do proposals and all of this, because it's so easy for us to get caught up in I know how to use my camera, so I'm good to go, right?
Yeah, it's an important component, being able to explain yourself, to write logically and powerfully, to let people know, like, yeah, this is how I'm going to spend your money. I mean, the National Geographic, a lot of the stories that I did for them, especially in the early going, all had budgets north of $250,000. Wow. And when you came back in, the editor would look at you and say, what have you done with my money? Let me see, there's a quid pro quo there, so to gather funding in an increasingly difficult environment, I think photographers have to be very proactive in the way they can seek work, explain themselves, establish clients, be innovative about the way they present themselves, their websites, their work, et cetera. It's a much more complicated picture, I think, than was heretofore.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. One thing that I noticed in your workshops that I've taken, and it certainly comes through in this new book, is that you project a real genuine humility that is refreshing. We seem to have a lot of disingenuousness these days, and having someone just be upfront and say, listen, this isn't, sometimes it doesn't work. I tried this, it didn't work. I'm not always brilliant. Not every shot is epic. And one of the things I liked about in your book is you talk about people who talk about their photos being epic, and how you say very clearly, don't ever say your photo's epic. If it's epic, it'll be epic. And I want to kind of drill down and get some of your wisdom on self-promotion and this idea that if you kind of fake it till you make it and be overconfident, that will somehow help you in this field. It seems to me that you go the opposite direction. You're like, hey, here's what I would do to spend your money, but I'm not perfect. So how does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, humility goes with the package, because we do fail a lot as photographers. We are fraught with frailties, and we also operate at the whim of the world. What's the light going to be like this afternoon when my job, it's very uncertain and can be very anxiety producing, to be sure. So yeah, I think it's best to keep your feet on the ground. Don't believe your own press notices, and don't get wrapped up in the whole ego of photography. Enjoy it. I mean, you have to have an ego because you have to step forward and control your fate, get a job, run the show, all that sort of stuff. But don't, any photographer who tells you that every time they pick up a camera, the angels are singing is just freaking lying to you, just are, because things don't always work out. And hopefully, the best part about a photographic career, being in it for the long haul, is you get bumped and bruised, but you pick yourself up off the canvas and you go back out because you just love doing this so much.
Yeah.
I don't know if I really answered the question there, but
no, I think you did. One of the things that I took from the book, my favorite part of the book is the stories of you as a young newspaper man. I was in newspapers. I know the thrill of hearing that press spin up, and the hours spent splashing fixer on yourself, and it's. I really miss those days. Those are as I get older, I look back and with much fondness on those days, and I think that one of the takeaways from that in reading your book is that you did not no one invited you into the newspaper and said, your work is amazing. We saw your work on who knows where, and we just think you're incredible, and we see you as an untapped talent. We're going to bring you in and nurture you and give you every opportunity to grow. You basically kicked the door open and then just kept scratching your way up. And I think that's where that humility comes from, is you weren't given a key. You had to kind of figure out how to sneak in through the window, right?
Well, an extensive critique at the New York Daily News, if your negatives were projected on the screen at deadline and there are people milling about, a classic thing would be like, whose shit is this? So yeah, you grow up, in an environment like that, you develop a fairly thick skin, and you realize not everybody is going to like your pictures. You're not going to be the belle of the ball for every photo editor out there, for sure. Some people are going to really work with you and like what you do. Other people will avoid you like the plague. It's never going to be universal.
I'm a West Coast guy. I grew up, and Jeff and I both are kind of West Coasters. I went and worked in small market newspapers, always been small market kind of person. Hearing you talk and reading your stories about your early days, I get a sense that there's a certain tenacity that New Yorkers especially and East Coasters have that, I'll be honest, I think we're a little soft out here in the West. Like I had an editor at AP just scream me out one night on the phone because I was blowing a deadline. And he yelled at me, he said, every newspaper in the United States is waiting for your fucking photo. And I never it didn't build my confidence. It actually reduced it quite a bit. And I was pretty gun shy from that point on. Do you think there's a tenacity that you had from being a kid who moved around a lot as a kid, who had to make friends a lot over and over, and then you had to kind of fight your way up in the business in New York? Did that give you a tenacity that a lot of people don't have?
I don't know about other folks, but yes, tenacity is a huge component of being a photographer, because it will not always go well. You will hear no, you will receive criticism. It's just part of what we do and who we are. So yeah, there's an element of chip on the shoulder thing maybe going on where, okay, all right, so you're going to fire me. You're going to not like my pictures. Well, I'll show you, and there's also kind of a lack of ego about it. At Geographic, I never cared. If I was the first photographer asked or the 10th photographer asked, my attitude was always, well, if I'm the 10th photographer you asked, I'll go out there and I'll show you why you should have asked me first. And so there's a competitive edge to that. I mean, and you have to compete. You have to compete for work. That's why there's a story in the book about the Queensboro Bridge. I climbed the Queensboro Bridge specifically in response to the fact that there was another photographer out there who was doing a lot of like building work in New York. And I was like, no, I'm gonna mix it up here. And so I ended up, climbed the bridge. I ended up climbing the World Trade Center antenna, the Empire State Building, because when the first climb up the Empire State Building, I was just so wired to do it. But they had made it clear, Guinness Book of World Records, the television show, had priority. And there's an ice shield up there ringing the antenna. It's quite precarious. You have to climb to the ice shield, and then you put on your harness, and you're clipped in the wind there. And it's not a lot of real estate, maybe 3 feet out from the antenna, and there's rungs, rebar that you start to climb. And I looked at the Guinness guy, and he put 1 foot on that and he put it back down. And I was not sympathetic. He was not going to make the climb. And I won't say the expletive I said it, but I just like, get out of my way. And I was going to climb that sucker, and there was just no way. And of course I failed. I got like 3 feet from the light, and they turned it off. So I didn't get the picture that ran in the Geographic until my 4th climb.
Wow.
Climbed that sucker 4 times. And you got to learn from your mistakes hang in there. You got to be like a cork. You no matter what the condition, whether it's calm or rough, you float.
I love it.
You know,
No matter how many times you get pushed down, you pop back up.
yeah, it's the nature of the business.
I will say I didn't think about it until you mentioned it, but you do seem to have a proclivity for climbing to the top of the tallest buildings, right? Is that, I think you went to the top of the Burj Khalifa, right? And
I did, yeah.
you've been in these amazing spots. I think they're great photographs, but what does it give you to put yourself in those positions? Because it's not a great spot to make photographs, right?
Well, your view is unlimited and limited at the same time. You can't move around very much. But yeah, I mean, the world is much photographed. So, if you can get to these very isolated, unusual places and make a few pictures, then that's a photograph that, might stand a test of time for a while, and that nobody else will easily get anyway, and there is kind of just a fun thing. Like I look at the Empire State Building when I'm down in New York City. Every once in a while I look up and say, yeah, that blinking red light, it's got my initials in it.
I love it. Love it.
Nice.
Yeah, I will say your photos of the bridge. Actually in the book, I have the PDF version. The hardback's not out yet. I can't wait to see it. But I actually wrote on my PDF, this shot rocks, of the bridge where you found the angle of the workers on each side. It's a very symmetrical vertical shot where the beam is in the middle. I just think that's a brilliant composition. And the fact that you took that while atop a bridge, untethered, is a testament to your tenacity, but also creativity under pressure. It's quite a shot for a young, scrappy photographer. Pretty cool.
It's back in the day when you could do those things. No safety belt. Like, yeah, go ahead up. It's crazy. Looking back on it, it's crazy. But fun to do. Definitely fun to do.
Yeah. And kind of give you a softball here, Joe. None of us are getting younger. And it's getting, photography is hard work. Doing it well is hard. As someone who is, finding it harder and harder to make a living, even though you have 40 years of reputation to lean on, when you get done and you decide that you and Annie are just going to hang out in Italy for the rest of your life and drink wine and watch the sunset. What photo that you've made so far is the one that you're gonna want people to remember you by?
Well, probably, the photographs that I remember most are pictures that a lot of people probably haven't seen. I mean, pictures I've made personally, Annie and I, adventures we've had together, my kids, those you keep close. But I got into the business to tell stories, be curious, be out in the world, all those things, and also to gather over time, conduct myself in a manner that gathered the respect of my peers. And that would be something that I would be happy to be remembered by. That he was good behind the camera. He was also a good person behind the camera. That would be a worthwhile thing, I think.
Yeah, and everybody can say that, right?
I won't go there, but I think it's our responsibility, to be the good shepherd, when you're out there as a photographer of not only your subjects but the pictures that result.
Well, I think that's why a lot of photographers adore you. Is you are kind of the photographer's photographer, and you're very relatable and personable and humble, and but also you inspire. I don't know how many times I've looked at your photos. I don't know how you did that. That's just incredible. So, Joe, I want to thank you for coming to Photocombobulate and spending some time with us. I know you're busy, and we're really excited about your new book, The Real Deal: Field Notes from the Life of a Working Photographer. And that's from Rocky Nook. Where would you suggest people find that book now that the hardback's just finally getting off the boat and is available
It is available if you order direct from Rocky Nook.
Okay.
That's the fastest way to get the hardcover copy. Amazon has a note saying they'll start to ship around January 25 or something like that. But if you wanted it, in a more immediate fashion, Rocky Nook, hit their website. That's the way to go.
Excellent. Yeah, we prefer to shop directly with Rocky Nook anyway, right, Jeff?
Absolutely.
You can also check out Jeff's books on Rocky Nook while you're there. Okay.
Yeah, but we're not here to sell those.
We're not here to sell Jeff's books. Got to be tenacious. All right. Joe McNally, legend, thank you for joining us. Everybody, if you want to see some of Joe's work, we will have links on the show notes at photocombobulate.com. And of course, you can always go to your website and your blog, which is awesome. What's the address for that, Joe?
JoeMcNally.com and JoeMcNally.com/blog.
Awesome. That's great. You also have a workshop coming up with a few spots left in Northern California, and Jeff and I would love to be there, but we're not going to be able to make it. If you want to spend some time with Joe McNally, there's your chance. Coming up, there's a great workshop in Napa. Looks wonderful. Wine and Joe McNally, I can't think of a better pairing.
It'll be a fun time out there for sure.
That's going to be great. Thanks so much for joining us today, Joe.
Thank you guys, both of you. Wonderful questions, and I appreciate the opportunity to just hang out with a couple of good photographers.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe.
All right. Thank you.